The title for this session, Market for Lemons in Banks and Financial Markets, is perhaps somewhat intriguing. You might wonder, what do lemons have to do with banks and financial markets? Over the course of the next few minutes, we will understand that relationship in great detail. Back in 1970, George Akerlof wrote a seminal paper titled The Market for Lemons, Quality, Uncertainty, and the Market Mechanisms. The common example used to explain this extremely complex theory proposed by Professor Akerlof has to do with buying used cars. Potential buyers of used cars cannot tell whether the car he wants to buy is a good car that will run well, which in the context of today's session is classified as a peach, or will it be a lemon that will give him continuous grief after the purchase. Interestingly, the person who knows most about this car is the current owner of the car. Chances are that in a used car showroom, the current owner is never present, and there is a perverse incentive for the used car salesman to actually make sure that the car is sold irrespective of whether it is a lemon or a peach. There is therefore an embedded but invisible conflict between the willingness to sell and the willingness to buy. If you're a buyer, you enter the used car showroom with the belief that the car you're likely to buy is more likely to be a lemon than a peach, and therefore you will want to pay less. The used car markets therefore will function very poorly. Moving away from the example of a used car market, let's see how lemons and peaches operate in the banking and financial markets. Fascinatingly, nowhere is this theory more relevant than in the world of banking and financial markets. Investors in the bonds of companies and banks who lend have enormous difficulty trying to distinguish between firms with high expected profits and low risk, what we classify in this context as peaches, and low expected profits and high risk, i.e. lemons. And therefore, investors and lenders, like in the used car market, will only pay the price that reflects the average quality. The good firms will therefore not want to come to the market at the average price because they think they can command a better price than what the market offers. For the bad firms, the average price is better than the higher price that they would command in the market. And therefore, quite like the used car market, the financial markets too will function very poorly. Let's examine an extension to this theory. Information asymmetry, adverse selection, moral hazard. Let's look at this in some detail and see how this plays out in banking and financial markets. First of all, information asymmetry means one party to the transaction not being privy to the same level of information as the other party to the transaction. The lender or the investor not having as much information as the borrower about the transaction at hand. By extension, therefore, firms and individuals who actively seek out loans in the markets are the ones who are high credit risk and hence have a perverse incentive to create information asymmetry. The fear of adverse selection, therefore, prevents intermediaries and investors in the bond market from lending and or investing in firms even though they may be worthy borrowers out there. Just like in a used car showroom, there may be some good cars, but how do you know which are the good ones? And how do investors and lenders solve this adverse selection problem? If a buyer can distinguish between, as we saw, a peach, which is a good credit, and a lemon, which is a bad credit, they will be willing to pay full price for the peach and perhaps punish the lemon. And if this can be achieved, the market will function exceptionally well. There are tools that are available to achieve this. Example, independent credit rating, stringent accounting standards, levels of disclosure, and making information available easily at zero cost through equity research analyst reports and so on and so forth. More recently, we've seen the emergence of instruments such as credit default swaps, guarantees, collaterals, etc., sought by lenders to hedge themselves against the adverse selection problem. In practice, firms with average to low financial performance, and they would inevitably be firms with a low credit rating, end up taking loans from the banks and hence incur a higher cost of borrowing. On the other hand, firms which have good financial performance and therefore a high credit rating would issue bonds and hence incur a lower cost of borrowing. In other words, if the markets are perfect, the lemons will go to the banks and the peaches will go to the bond market. Interestingly, there exists a very high correlation between a country's economic development and growth of financial markets. If you cast the net wide across the world, you will find that vibrant bond markets and equity stock markets exist in those countries which are already classified as developed economies. On the other hand, less developed countries end up with the bank-based model since the financial markets might not be well developed.